The final phase began with Zarthok's most devastating attack. 300 years of experience went into the strike, every lesson learned from every battle fought. His energy weapons blazed with power that could shatter mountains. His claws moved faster than lightning. His war cry shook the arena itself. Should have ended the match instantly. But Katie Phillips had spent the last hour studying not just Zarthok, but the entire simulation. She understood something that no warrior before her had ever grasped. The arena wasn't just a place where fights happened. It was a complex system that could be manipulated by anyone smart enough to understand its rules. Her response to Zarthok's attack looked simple. She took 3 steps to the left, knelt down, and placed her hand on a specific spot on the arena floor. To the billions watching across the galaxy, it looked like she was giving up, but those 3 steps put her in the exact position where 17 different systems in the arena intersected. The spot where she placed her hand was a control node that most fighters never noticed because they were too busy trying to kill each other. Katie's move wasn't a single action. It was the beginning of a sequence that used the arena's own systems. As weapons when Zarthok's energy blasts hit the floor near Katie, they didn't just strike metal. They struck a carefully calculated point where the arena's power grid was most vulnerable. The energy from his own weapons fed into the system, creating a feedback loop that Katie had designed. The arena began to resonate. Energy patterns that had been invisible before suddenly became visible as glowing lines crisscrossing the floor. The entire platform started to vibrate at a frequency that Katie had calculated during her observation. Zarthok felt the vibration in his bones and realized something was wrong. But it was too late to stop his attack. He was committed to the strike pattern, and his own momentum carried him forward. Katie's hand on the control node wasn't just touching it. She was inputting a command sequence that she had deduced from watching the arena's behavior for the past hour. The sequence was incredibly complex, requiring split-second timing and perfect understanding of the system's architecture. But Katie had always been good at video games. And this was just a very sophisticated video game with the highest possible stakes. The feedback loop she had created began to amplify. Zarthok's energy weapons, designed to destroy enemies, were now feeding power into a system that turned that same energy against him. Every blast he fired made the effect stronger. What is happening? Zarthok roared, trying to stop his attack. But the arena's systems had locked onto his energy signature. His own weapons were trapped in the feedback loop, continuing to fire whether he wanted them to or not. Katie stood up slowly, keeping her hand on the control node. "I told you," she said calmly. "I changed the rules." The energy patterns on the floor began to move, creating a spiral that centered on Zarthok. The massive warrior tried to move away, but the arena's gravity systems were part of Katie's sequence. Every step he took was guided by forces he couldn't see or understand. Galactic audience watched in stunned silence as the impossible happened. Zarthok, the undefeated champion, was being defeated by his own power, redirected through systems that a teenage human girl had somehow learned to control. "This cannot be," gasped a commentator. "She's manipulating the arena itself." "How is that possible?" asked another. "The arena systems are beyond the understanding of any single species." But they were wrong. The systems weren't beyond understanding. They just required a different type of thinking than most species possessed. Humans had evolved as tool users. They were natural problem solvers who could see patterns and systems that other species missed. Katie had taken that human ability and applied it to the most complex virtual environment ever created. Zarthok's energy weapons finally stopped firing, drained by the feedback loop. But the arena's systems were still active, still following the sequence Katie had initiated. Energy continued to flow through the spiral pattern, creating a vortex that pulled the massive warrior toward its center. "Impossible," Zarthok gasped, struggling against forces that were invisible but incredibly powerful. No warrior can control the arena. It is neutral ground. You're right, Katie said. No warrior can control it. But I'm not really a warrior, am I? I'm just a girl who's really good at understanding how things work. The vortex reached its climax. All of the energy that Zarthok had put into his attacks, amplified by the arenas. Systems and guided by Katie's sequence, converged on a single point. That point was occupied by Zarthok himself. The explosion of redirected energy wasn't violent or dramatic. It was almost gentle, like watching a soap bubble pop. Zarthok simply dissolved into pixels and faded away, eliminated by his own power, turned against him through systems he had never bothered to understand. Zarthok the Destroyer has been eliminated. A voice announced with the same calm tone it had used for every other elimination. Victory to participant 847. The galaxy fell silent. For the first time in 300 years, someone had defeated the apex warlord. And that someone was a 16-year-old human girl who had entered the simulation. Less than 2 hours ago, Katie removed her hand from the control node and looked around the now quiet arena. The energy patterns faded back to invisibility. The systems returned to their neutral state. She was alone on the platform, the last warrior. Standing. We have a new Apex champion, the voice announced. Katie Phillips of Earth. The reaction across the galaxy was immediate and explosive. On some worlds, beings who had never heard of humans began demanding information about this new species. On others, military leaders who had dismissed Earth as unimportant started making emergency plans, but the most profound reaction came from the species who had been preparing to invade Earth, thinking humans were weak and primitive. Those invasion fleets quietly changed course and headed home. Katie Phillips had done more than win a competition. She had proven that humans possessed a type of intelligence that could overcome any challenge, no matter how impossible it seemed. On Earth, Katie's parents were crying and laughing at the same time. Government officials were celebrating. Scientists were already making plans to study what Katie had done, but Katie herself felt strangely calm. As the arena dissolved around her, as she prepared to return home, she thought about what had just happened. She hadn't won through strength or speed or warrior skill. She had won by being human, by seeing patterns that others missed, by understanding systems that others ignored, by thinking differently about problems that others considered unsolvable. The transport beam activated, preparing to send her home. But before she left, Katie had one last message for the galaxy. This simulation was never really about fighting, she said, her voice carrying to every world in the Federation. It was about problem solving. And if there's one thing humans are good at, it's solving problems that everyone else thinks are impossible. When Katie reappeared in her bedroom on Earth, everything looked exactly the same as when she had left. Her computer was still running. Her parents were downstairs making dinner. Her ordinary life was waiting for her, but everything had changed. Humanity was no longer seen as a primitive species hiding on the edge of known space. They were now recognized as possessing a unique and powerful form of intelligence. Offers began arriving within hours. Alien species wanted to hire human consultants. Military organizations wanted to study human tactics. Scientists wanted to understand how human brains worked differently from their own. Katie turned them all down. She had proven her point, and now she wanted to go back to being a normal teenager. But she kept the championship medal on her desk, right next to her gaming setup. Sometimes, when she was playing a particularly difficult game, she would glance at it and remember that the most extraordinary victories often come from the most ordinary people. And across the galaxy, a new phrase entered the languages of 1,000 worlds. Think like a human. It meant approaching problems from unexpected angles. It meant seeing solutions that others missed. It meant never giving up, even when the odds seemed impossible. Katie Phillips had changed the galaxy forever, and she had done it by being exactly who she was, a quiet girl from Ohio who was really, really good at figuring things out. The simulation was over. The real adventure was just beginning. The final arena formed around Katie and Zarthok, like a giant circle floating in space. The platform was perfectly smooth, with no places to hide and no environmental hazards that Katie could use to her advantage. It was designed for a pure test of combat skill. Across the galaxy, billions of beings watched on their screens. This was the most impossible final match in the simulation's history. Zarthok, the undefeated champion who had won over 500 consecutive battles, facing a 16-year-old human girl who had only entered the simulation an hour ago. "This is a joke," said one commentator. "The human child will be eliminated in seconds." "Perhaps the humans have some secret weapon we don't know about," suggested another. But most viewers were already preparing to change channels. They expected the match to end before it really began. On Earth, Katie's parents sat in front of their television, holding hands and barely breathing. Government officials filled rooms across the planet, watching their unlikely representative face the most dangerous warrior in known space. "She's so small," Katie's mother whispered. "She's our daughter," her father replied. "She's stronger than she looks." In the arena, Zarthok began to circle Katie slowly. His massive claws clicked against the metal floor with each step. His reptilian eyes studied her from every angle, looking for weaknesses. "You have done well to reach this point, small human," he said in his grinding voice. "You eliminated opponents who have terrorized star systems. You used tactics I have never seen before. But now we face each other with no tricks, no environmental hazards, no clever strategies. Just warrior against warrior." Katie stood perfectly still in the center of the circle. She looked tiny compared to the massive alien, like a child standing next to a dragon. Her simple clothes and basic equipment seemed almost ridiculous next to his scarred armor and energy weapons. "I offer you one chance to surrender with honor," Zarthok continued. "You have proven that humans are not as weak as we believed. That is victory enough." The galactic audience expected Katie to accept. Facing Zarthok in direct combat was suicide. Even legendary champions with centuries of experience had fallen to him in seconds. But Katie shook her head. "I didn't come this far to give up now." Zarthok nodded with something that might have been respect. "Then we fight. Know that I will make your death quick and painless. You have earned that much." He raised his weapons, energy crackling around the blades. His muscles tensed as he prepared to attack. The galaxy held its breath. But before Zarthok could move, Katie spoke again. "Can I ask you something?" The massive warrior paused, surprised. "What?" "In 300 years of fighting, have you ever wondered why you always win?" Zarthok's eyes narrowed. "Because I am the strongest. Because I am the fastest. Because I have trained longer and fought harder than any warrior who has ever lived." "That's what everyone thinks," Katie said. "But I've been watching you fight for the past hour. I've seen every move you make, every strategy you use, every pattern you follow." "Patterns?" Zarthok laughed, but there was uncertainty in his voice now. "I do not follow patterns. I adapt to each opponent." "You always move counterclockwise around your enemies," Katie said calmly. "You prefer overhead attacks to ground-level strikes. You favor your right claw over your left by a ratio of 3-1. When facing multiple opponents, you eliminate the weakest first to demoralize the others." Zarthok's expression changed. For the first time in centuries, he looked genuinely surprised. "You have 12 primary attack combinations that you rotate through depending on your opponent's species and fighting style. Katie continued. You have 3 standard defensive postures, and you switch between them every 47 seconds on average. Impossible, Zarthok growled. I have fought for 3 centuries. I have faced every type of warrior, used every strategy, adapted to every situation. That's exactly the problem, Katie said. You've been winning for so long that you've forgotten how to lose. You've become predictable. The galactic audience was stunned into silence. No one had ever analyzed Zarthok's fighting style before. Most opponents were too busy trying to survive to notice patterns. But Katie had done something unprecedented. She had treated the greatest warrior in the galaxy like a video game boss, studying his moves until she understood his programming. You want to know why you always win? Katie asked. It's not because you're unbeatable. It's because everyone who fights you makes the same mistake. And what mistake is that? Zarthok demanded. They try to beat you at your own game. They try to be stronger, faster, more aggressive. But you've had 300 years to perfect that game. You can't be beaten by playing it. Zarthok's confusion was turning to anger. Then how would you beat me, small human? Katie smiled. By changing the rules. Before Zarthok could respond, Katie did something that shocked everyone watching. Instead of preparing to fight, she sat down on the arena floor. What are you doing? Zarthok roared. I'm not fighting you, Katie said calmly. I'm not playing your game anymore. You cannot win by refusing to fight. Can't I? Katie looked up at him with steady eyes. This simulation isn't really about combat. It's about problem solving. Every challenge has been a puzzle disguised as a battle. The warriors who lasted longest weren't necessarily the strongest. They were the ones who understood the deeper rules. Zarthok raised his weapons. Enough riddles. Fight me. But as he moved to attack, something strange happened. The arena began to shift again, just as it had throughout the simulation. But this time, Katie had predicted exactly when and how it would change. The floor tilted at precisely the angle she expected. Gravity shifted in exactly the direction she had calculated. Energy barriers appeared in locations she had mapped out during her hour of observation. Katie wasn't just sitting randomly. She was positioning herself at the exact point where all of the arena's systems would converge. Zarthok's attack, perfectly timed for a normal arena, became chaotic as the environment changed around him. His weapons struck energy barriers that reflected his own power back at him. His footing gave way as the gravity shifted. His perfect balance was destroyed by changes he couldn't predict. For the first time in 300 years, Zarthok stumbled. Impossible. He gasped, struggling to regain his footing. The arena follows no pattern. The changes are random. No, Katie said, still sitting calmly while chaos swirled around her. Nothing in this simulation is random. Everything follows rules. I just spent an hour learning what those rules are. The galactic audience watched in amazement as Katie remained perfectly stable, while Zarthok, the greatest warrior who had ever lived, struggled against environmental forces that seemed to obey her commands. You see, Katie continued, everyone who enters this simulation thinks it's about fighting, but it's really about understanding. The arena isn't just a place where battles happen. It's part of the test itself. Zarthok tried to adapt, drawing on 3 centuries of combat experience, but every move he made seemed to work against him. The arena's systems, which had always seemed neutral before, now appeared to favor Katie. How? He demanded, his voice filled with something he had never experienced before, confusion. I figured out something that no one else did, Katie said. This simulation doesn't test who's the best warrior. It tests who's the best problem solver. And humans are really, really good at solving problems. The truth was beginning to dawn on the watching galaxy. The ultimate combat simulation wasn't what they had thought it was. It wasn't about strength or speed or warrior skill. It was about intelligence. And humans, despite being physically weaker than most galactic species, had a particular type of intelligence that no one had ever seen before. Katie stood up as the arena stabilized around her. Zarthok was still struggling to understand what had happened. "The final phase is about to begin," she said gently. "Are you ready?" For the first time in his life, Zarthok realized he might lose, and Katie Phillips, the quiet girl from Ohio who spent her days playing video games, prepared to execute the move that would change galactic history forever. Katie Phillips looked around the arena and felt very small. The surviving warriors were like nothing she had ever imagined. They were covered in scars, armed with weapons that glowed with deadly energy, and they all looked at her like she was a mistake. She had watched Jake Morrison get eliminated just as she arrived. The stone giant had crushed him without even trying. Now she was the only human left, and she had no idea what she was doing. "Pathetic," one of the aliens said. It looked like a shark walking on two legs. "The humans send a child as their final warrior?" Other creatures laughed. The sound was horrible, like breaking glass mixed with animal screams. Katie wanted to run, but there was nowhere to go. The arena was floating in space, surrounded by swirling colors that hurt to look at. She was trapped here with the most dangerous beings in the galaxy. But then she remembered something her gaming friends had always told her. When you enter a new game late, don't try to catch up by fighting. Instead, watch and learn. So while the other warriors went back to trying to kill each other, Katie found a quiet corner and started observing. The arena was still changing shape. Platforms appeared and disappeared. Gravity shifted without warning, and environmental hazards popped up randomly. At least, that's what it looked like at first. Katie had always been good at seeing patterns. In video games, she could predict where enemies would spawn or when special events would happen. Other players thought she was psychic, but really she just paid attention to details that others missed. As she watched the simulation, she began to notice things. The platform changes weren't random. They followed a mathematical sequence. Every 17 seconds, the arena shifted in a predictable way. The gravity changes happened in cycles. Even the environmental hazards appeared at specific intervals. Was like a giant, complex video game. And Katie had been playing video games her whole life. While she studied the arena's patterns, the other warriors continued fighting. Zarthok was still dominating, moving through opponents like they were practice targets. Every attack he made was perfect, every defense flawless. But Katie noticed something about him too. His movements weren't as random as they seemed. He had favorite attack patterns. He always moved counterclockwise around the arena. He preferred to attack from above rather than below. After 300 years of winning, Zarthok had developed habits. And habits could be predicted. "Look at the human child," one of the aliens said, pointing at Katie. "She's too scared to fight." The galactic audience was watching the simulation on screens across thousands of worlds. Most of them had forgotten about Katie already. The few who remembered her arrival were making jokes about humans sending a teenager to fight their battles. "She's not even moving," a commentator said. "Perhaps humans freeze with fear when faced with real danger." But Katie wasn't frozen. She was learning. As the number of warriors dropped from 40 to 30 to 20, Katie began to understand something important. This wasn't just a test of fighting ability. It was a test of understanding. The simulation rewarded certain behaviors over others. Warriors who fought intelligently lasted longer than those who relied on brute strength. Fighters who adapted to the environment survived, while those who ignored it were eliminated. The arena itself was part of the challenge. It wasn't just a place where the fight happened. It was a tool that could be used by anyone smart enough to figure it out. Katie started moving, but not the way the other warriors expected. Instead of looking for fights, she positioned herself in places where the arena's changes would give her advantages. Instead of attacking directly, she started using environmental hazards to eliminate opponents. Her first victory came by accident. A flying alien was chasing her across a narrow bridge. Katie jumped aside just as the bridge disappeared on schedule. The alien couldn't stop in time and fell into the void below. Elimination by environmental hazard, the voice announced. Credited to participant 847. Katie realized she had just eliminated an opponent without even trying to fight it. Her second victory was more deliberate. She led a group of crystalline warriors into an area where she knew a gravity shift would happen. When the gravity reversed, they were caught off guard and crashed into the ceiling. Katie was ready for it and used the momentum to launch herself to safety. Eliminations by environmental manipulation, the voice announced. Credited to participant 847. Now some of the other warriors were starting to pay attention to her. The human child wasn't just hiding. She was using the arena itself as a weapon. Tarao, the insect-like creature with multiple drone bodies, tried to corner her with a coordinated swarm attack. But Katie had noticed that his drones always moved in the same formation. She led them into a maze section of the arena where she knew the passages would shift, separating the drones from each other. Without their coordination, the individual drones were weak. Katie eliminated them one by one using simple tactics she had learned from playing strategy games. Taral of the Hive Collective has been eliminated, the voice announced. The galactic audience fell silent. Taral had been a champion for over a century. He had conquered entire star systems. And he had just been defeated by a teenage human girl, Princess Villana. The psychic alien who could move objects with her mind decided Katie was becoming dangerous. She attacked with telekinetic force that should have crushed Katie instantly. But Katie had been watching Villana too. The princess was incredibly powerful, but she had a weakness. Her psychic abilities required concentration, and she always closed her eyes when using her strongest attacks. Katie used a piece of reflective metal to bounce light into Villana's eyes at the exact moment she was preparing a devastating attack. The princess's concentration broke, her power backfired, and she eliminated herself. Princess Villana of the Ethereal Dominion has been eliminated, the voice announced. Now, the entire galaxy was paying attention. The human child had just defeated 2 legendary champions, using methods no one had ever seen before. Zarthok stopped his own battles to study Katie more carefully. For the first time in 300 years, he was genuinely curious about an opponent. Interesting, he said in his grinding stone voice. The small human thinks differently than the others. Katie felt his attention like a weight pressing down on her. This was the real threat. Zarthok wasn't just strong and fast and experienced. He was intelligent. He could adapt. He could learn, and he was starting to learn about her. The arena continued to shrink as more warriors were eliminated. Katie found herself in increasingly dangerous situations, but she always seemed to find a way out. Sometimes it looked like luck. Sometimes it looked like skill. But really, it was something else entirely. Katie was reading the simulation like a book. She understood its rules better than anyone who had ever entered it. While other warriors saw chaos and danger, she saw a system with patterns and logic. The other survivors began to realize that this quiet human girl was somehow more dangerous than opponents with claws and energy weapons. She eliminated them not through superior strength, but through superior understanding. As the number of warriors dropped to 10, then 5, and 3, Katie remained. She had survived longer than legendary champions who had ruled entire sectors of space. But now came the real test. The final arena formed around the last 3 warriors. Zarthok, a creature made of living energy called Nixara, and Katie. Nixara attacked first, sending bolts of pure energy at both opponents. Zarthok deflected them with his armored hide. Katie dodged by predicting exactly where the bolts would go based on patterns she had observed. Zarthok eliminated Nixara with a series of attacks so fast they looked like a blur, the energy being dissolved into scattered particles that faded away. Now it was just Katie and the Apex Warlord. Alone in the final arena. The entire galaxy watched in silence. This was impossible. A human child facing the greatest warrior who had ever lived. It should end in seconds. But Zarthok didn't attack immediately. Instead, he studied Katie with new respect. "You are not what you appear to be, small human," he said. "You have eliminated warriors who should have crushed you easily." "How?" Katie looked up at the massive lizard warrior. He was 12 feet tall, covered in scars from 1,000 battles, armed with weapons that could destroy starships. Everything about him radiated power and danger. But Katie had spent the entire simulation preparing for this moment. She had analyzed every aspect of his fighting style, understood the arena's mechanics better than its creators, and most importantly, she had figured out what the simulation was actually testing. "I learned something you never did," she said quietly. "And what is that?" Katie smiled for the first time since entering the simulation. "I learned that the strongest fighter doesn't always win. Sometimes the smartest fighter does." Zarthok laughed, a sound like boulders falling down a mountain. "We shall see, small human. We shall see." The final battle was about to begin. The simulation began with a sound like thunder mixed with screaming. Jake Morrison found himself standing on what looked like a giant floating island surrounded by swirling colors. The ground beneath his feet felt real, but he knew it was all created by alien computers. 846 other warriors materialized around him. Some looked almost human. Others looked like monsters from horror movies. A few looked like living machines or balls of energy with no solid format. "All, welcome to the ultimate combat simulation," a voice said from everywhere and nowhere. "You have 30 seconds to prepare. Then the trial begins." Amy Carter checked her rifle. The weapon felt different here, lighter but more powerful. "Stay together," she whispered to her team. Ben Rodriguez was looking at the other warriors. "Jake, I don't think we're ready for this." Before Jake could answer, the ground started changing. The flat island split into multiple levels, creating a maze of platforms connected by bridges that appeared and disappeared. Gravity shifted in different areas. Some zones filled with thick fog, while others blazed with artificial sunlight. "Begin," the voice announced. Chaos erupted immediately. Zarthok moved like lightning, despite his massive size. His first victim was a warrior that looked like a walking tree. The lizard-like creature's claws tore through the plant being's bark like it was paper. Green sap splattered across the ground as the tree warrior dissolved into pixels. "Elimination number 1, the voice announced calmly. A group of insect-like aliens attacked a crystalline creature that stood 12 feet tall. The crystal being shattered their exoskeletons with sound waves that made the air itself vibrate. The insects screamed as they fell off the platform into the swirling void below. Eliminations 2 through 7. Jake's team moved carefully through the chaos. They had trained for urban warfare, but this was beyond anything they had experienced. The platforms kept shifting, creating new paths and closing others. What looked like solid ground one moment became empty air the next. Lisa Stone was the first of them to engage an enemy. A creature that looked like liquid metal tried to surround her. She used her martial arts training to stay mobile, striking at what seemed like vital points. But how do you hurt something made of metal that can change shape? The creature wrapped around her leg. Lisa felt her bones being crushed. Amy's rifle shot rang out. The bullet was designed for this simulation. loaded with energy that disrupted alien technology. The metal creature released Lisa and stumbled backward. "Thanks," Lisa gasped, limping away, but their position was exposed now. A flying creature with 4 wings and razor-sharp talons dove at Ben Rodriguez. He rolled aside and triggered a small explosive. The blast sent the flying alien tumbling, but it recovered quickly and attacked again. Jake realized they were outmatched. These aliens had evolved for fighting. They had natural weapons, armor, and abilities that humans couldn't match. But humans had something else. "Guerrilla tactics," he shouted to his team. "Don't fight fair. Use the environment." They began moving through the maze-like structure, avoiding direct confrontation when possible. When they had to fight, they used hit-and-run attacks, striking quickly and disappearing before their enemies could respond. It worked. For a while, Amy found a high position and began picking off isolated enemies with her rifle. Her training as a sniper served her well. She eliminated 3 aliens before a group of energy beings figured out her location and forced her to move. Ben used his explosives to collapse bridges and create barriers. He managed to trap a squad of armored warriors in a dead-end section and eliminate them with a perfectly placed charge. Lisa adapted her fighting style to the weird gravity and shifting platforms. She eliminated 2 opponents by using their own momentum against them, sending them flying off the edges into the void. But Jake could see they were still losing. The arena was getting smaller as sections collapsed or disappeared. The number of warriors was dropping fast, and soon there would be nowhere to hide. On the other side of the arena, truly powerful fighters were demonstrating why they were legends in their parts of the galaxy. Terrell of the Hive Collective controlled dozens of drone bodies simultaneously. Each drone was small and weak individually, but together they moved like a single organism. Terrell overwhelmed opponents through sheer numbers, swarming them from all directions while maintaining perfect coordination. Princess Velana of the Ethereal Dominion didn't even seem to be trying. She floated above the battle, moving objects. With her mind, when enemies attacked her, their weapons turned to dust. When she attacked them, they simply stopped existing. A warrior from the burning worlds fought with weapons made of pure fire. Everything it touched burst into flames. A champion from the ice realm froze opponents solid with a breath of arctic wind. A creature from the deep dark moved through shadows, peering behind enemies without warning. And above it all, Zarthok was methodically eliminating anyone who challenged him. The lizard warrior had fought in this simulation for 3 centuries. He knew every trick, every strategy, every weakness of every species. His movements were perfect, his timing flawless. Jake watched in amazement as Zarthok faced 5 opponents at once and destroyed them all in less than 30 seconds. This wasn't just skill. This was artistry. Elimination 412, the voice announced. More than half the warriors were already gone, and the real fighting had barely begun. Amy's position was compromised again. This time, the aliens had learned from her previous attacks. They came from multiple directions, using tactics designed to counter human sniping techniques. She eliminated 2 more before a plasma bolt caught her in the shoulder. The pain was incredible, more real than any simulation should feel. She stumbled and fell from her platform. "Amy!" Jake shouted, but there was nothing he could do. She dissolved into pixels before hitting the ground. Ben lasted longer. He had created a fortress using collapsed debris and was holding off multiple attackers with carefully placed explosives. But his ammunition was running low, and more enemies kept coming. A creature that looked like living shadow slipped through his defenses. Ben's last explosive eliminated the shadow, but the blast was too close. He was caught in his own explosion. Lisa made it further than anyone expected. Her martial art skills, adapted to the strange environment, allowed her to defeat opponents who should have been much stronger. She moved like a dancer, turning the shifting gravity and unstable platforms to her advantage. But even she couldn't last forever. A group of crystalline warriors cornered her on a small platform. She fought beautifully, eliminating 2 of them, before the others overwhelmed her with sonic attacks that shattered her bones. Jake was alone now, the last human in the simulation. Around him, less than 50 warriors remained. The arena had shrunk to a few connected platforms floating in space. He should have been eliminated already. He wasn't the strongest or the fastest or the most skilled. But he was stubborn, and he was smart, and he refused to give up, using everything he had learned in 15 years of military service. Jake stayed alive through cunning and determination. He eliminated 3 more opponents using environmental hazards and desperate tactics, but his luck ran out when he faced a massive creature from the Titan worlds. The being was 20 feet tall and made of living stone. Jake's weapons couldn't even scratch its hide. The stone giant picked him up with one hand and prepared to crush him. "Wait," Jake said, looking around the arena. "Where's our other warrior?" The giant paused, confused. "Humans sent 2 groups," Jake continued, buying time. "Military and civilian. The girl should be here by now." And at that moment, as Jake was about to be eliminated, a small figure materialized on the edge of the arena. Katie Phillips had finally arrived. She looked around at the devastation, at the handful of surviving warriors, at the massive alien creatures that had eliminated hundreds of others. She looked very small and very young and very out of place. The surviving warriors, including Zarthok, turned to stare at her. "Participant 847 has entered the simulation," the voice announced. Katie Phillips, wearing simple clothes and carrying basic equipment, had arrived just in time to witness the elimination of Earth's military champion. She was completely alone, facing the most dangerous warriors in the galaxy. And somewhere in her mind, she was already beginning to understand the patterns that would let her win. The message arrived on Earth at exactly noon. It came from somewhere in deep space, written in perfect English, though no human had ever sent it. "Your species has been selected for the ultimate combat simulation. Send your best warriors. The trials begin in 7 days." Captain Jake Morrison read the message 3 times before calling his team. He had spent 15 years in the military, fought in wars across 2 continents, and never backed down from a fight. But this was different. This was aliens. "Amy, Ben, Lisa," he said into his phone. "Get to the base, now." Within hours, they were sitting in a cold metal room while scientists explained what they knew. The message had come from something called the Galactic Federation. Earth was being invited to join some kind of contest. A test of strength between different worlds. Amy Carter cracked her knuckles. She was the best sniper in the army, could hit a target from 2 miles away. "So we're fighting aliens?" "It appears so," said Dr. Williams, the lead scientist. "The simulation is virtual, but the stakes are real. Winners get respect in the galaxy. Losers get ignored." Ben Rodriguez had been quiet until now. He was in explosives. Expert, calm under pressure. "What do we know about the competition?" "Not much," Dr. Williams admitted. "But there's something called an apex warlord. Someone named Zarthok. He's won this thing for 300 years straight." Lisa Stone whistled low. She was a martial arts champion before joining the military. 300 years? How long do these aliens live? Much longer than us, apparently. Jake stood up. "Doesn't matter. We represent Earth now. We'll show them what humans can do." The team spent the next week training. They studied alien languages, practiced with new weapons, and tried to prepare for the unknown. Scientists worked around the clock to understand the alien technology that would transport them to the simulation. But there was a problem. The aliens had been watching Earth longer than anyone realized. Katie Phillips was 16 years old and lived in a small town in Ohio. She spent most of her time playing video games in her bedroom. Her parents thought she wasted too much time on computers, but Katie saw patterns everywhere. In games, in math problems, even in the way birds flew outside her window. She was really good at games. Not just good, she was extraordinary. She could see solutions that other players missed. She could predict what would happen next. Other gamers online called her a genius, but Katie just thought she was lucky. What Katie didn't know was that alien machines had been watching her play. Every move she made, every strategy she used, every problem she solved was being recorded and analyzed. The aliens had been studying human behavior for decades, and Katie was the most interesting human they had found. The invitation came to her house on the same day the military team was preparing to leave. Her mother signed for the package, confused by the strange symbols on the envelope. "Katie, honey, this is for you." Her mother called upstairs. Katie opened the letter and nearly dropped it. It was written in the same style as the message to the military, but this one was personal. It explained that she had been selected based on her unique problem-solving abilities and unconventional tactical thinking. She had 1 hour to decide. Katie ran downstairs to find her parents. "Mom, Dad, I need to tell you something." The conversation didn't go well. Her parents thought it was a joke, then a scam, and maybe something dangerous. But the letter included a phone number. When they called they reached Dr. Williams at the military base. "We didn't know about this," he admitted. "But the aliens seem to want her specifically." "She's just a kid," Katie's father said. "So was Joan of Arc," Katie said quietly. "So was Alexander the Great." Her parents looked at her with new eyes. Their quiet daughter, who spent her days playing games, was talking about changing the world. The transport was scheduled to leave in 6 hours. The military team was already at the launch site, checking their equipment one last time. Jake Morrison was confident. They had trained hard, planned carefully, and represented the best Earth had to offer. But there was a delay with Katie's transport. Technical problems, the alien said. She would have to arrive later, after the simulation had already begun. She would miss the orientation, the practice rounds, the chance to study her opponents. She would be the last to enter. Jake's team materialized in a strange, waiting area filled with creatures from nightmares and dreams. Tall blue beings with too many arms. Small gray creatures with large black eyes. Things that looked like walking crystals. Things that looked like living shadows. They all stared at the humans with expressions that clearly said, "What are these weak creatures doing here?" Amy whispered to Jake, "I don't think they're impressed." A creature that looked like a giant lizard walking on 2 legs approached them. It wore armor covered in scars and carried weapons that hummed with energy. "You are the humans?" it asked, in a voice like grinding stone. "We are," Jake replied, trying to sound confident. "I am Zarthok. I have killed warriors from 1,000 worlds. I have conquered empires. I have never lost a battle." The creature leaned closer. "You will provide me with 30 seconds of entertainment before I crush you." Other aliens laughed. The sound was like breaking glass, mixed with animal howls. Jake felt his team tense behind him. They were soldiers, ready to fight. But looking around the room, he began to understand what they were really facing. These weren't just aliens. These were predators from worlds where only the strongest survived. And somewhere back on Earth, a 16-year-old girl was trying to convince her parents to let her join the most dangerous competition in the galaxy. "Trust me," Katie said, holding the strange transport device. "I know what I'm doing." She pressed the button just as Jake's team was entering the simulation. She would arrive late, unprepared, and completely alone. But Katie had something the Enso others didn't have. She had spent her whole life learning that the best solutions usually came from thinking differently than everyone else. The simulation was about to begin, and Earth's real champion hadn't even arrived yet.